Learning a black Gemara. Today's daf is the new Pedic Beishamai, Daf Kuf Zayin Amid Aleph. And we're just a little bit more than over 2 weeks before we finish with Yevamos. This is all about Miyun. Miyun, remember, is about a girl who got married under Bas Mitzvah. So if her father married her off, the Mahatorah she'd married, Kedushik Tana from her father Mahatorah. But if the father passed away, then the siblings or the mother married her. It's only with the Rabbanon. We actually allowed them to marry her because we don't want her just to roam around the streets and be abused. So therefore, we gave them the power and the right to go ahead and give Kedushim. It's only with the Rabbanon. So what she needs to do, if she's not happy, is before she reaches the age of 12, to do Miyun. Mean is when she says, I don't want to continue here anymore, and she just walks out. We'll see. They used to write a document called a get me in, but that's what they did. So we have, there's another possibility also the father's alive, and it's called a Yisayma B'chayavi, and that is the father's alive, married her off, and then she got divorced. So now the father loses his rights. So regarding me, and we have a number of arguments from Yesham Beisil how far we take it. So the Mishnah says, Beis Shammai says, a memayin el arusis. Which girl has the ability to be memayin? Only if she merely got engaged. But once she's married and they had relations, we don't want it to turn into znus, so therefore there's no more miyin. Beisilayin arusis unasuas. Even if she got married, if she decided to walk out, she walks out, and because it went through a process of kedushin and the suy and all that, we don't treat it like znus. Beis Shammai says only an original husband can she be mine, but later the husband dies childless, and now she confronts her brother-in-law. Me no longer is effective. Now that she's a married woman, she has to go through the whole process. Get chalitzo yibum. According to Basil, even the brother-in-law, because the brother-in-law stands in the place of the Reuben. It's not like the brother-in-law is a new entity. The brother-in-law stands in the place of Reuben, and since you could have walked out from the original husband, you can walk out from the brother-in-law. That's argument number 2. Argument number 3. The shaman aiming bifanav. She can only do me in front of the husband. The Basil aiming bifanav. Ushalai bifanav. Doesn't have to be in front of the husband. Number 4. Beishamai aiming bibezin. Beishamai says it has to be done in front of a bezin. And Basil says bibezin ushalai bibezin. In front of a bezin and not in front of a bezin. And already we explained it doesn't mean not a bezin at all. It means you don't need experts. You don't need mumchim, which is quite an interesting thing. Because when it comes to Gittin, let's say we need a bezin. The bezin doesn't have to be mumchin because we have a concept called a non-shlichosai abdin. Any bezin appointed today, they're representing the previous generations. Yet by miyun, according to Bishama, you need mumchin, as if miyun is even stricter than a get. So they want to say because get is much more common, so they decided to use this rule of non-shlichosai abdin. Miyun is far less common. And therefore, they didn't employ this rule. You need mumchin in their own right. You can't say they're representing the previous generations. They didn't anticipate it because it doesn't happen very often. What is interesting is that that we assume that a get requires a bezin, which that's how it's prevalent today, is lav dafka. The Neidim Yehuda proves that you need a bezin, and one of the proofs is how can miyan be stricter than a get? A miyan needs a bezin and get doesn't, according to Beis Hill. And we'll see the Art Tanaim hold that mean doesn't need to get either. But nevertheless, he still holds it needs a bezin, and by get you don't need it. Makes sense. So the Neidim Yehuda Paschal, you need a bezin by. However, in the Gemara Gittin, based on the Gemara Gittin, where it talks about what Daf is right now, in the early first Pedic, about if the Eidim can become the Dayanim, the Rav Kiva Eger, Sam Sefer, and others, Paskin, you don't need a bezin when it comes to get. 2 people are enough. It's just became the minig you have 30 people. So it comes out that a miyun is stricter than a get. A get 2 people is enough, and miyun needs a bezin. Okay, then we continue. And number 5. She can go through this process. She can get married, walk away, 4 or 5 times. They don't want her on the streets. It's not working out. They try again and again. What kind of business is this? She keeps living with a man for a month and then moves on to the next man. That's a very promiscuous kind of style. And Ella Mamenes, this is what she does. She's memayin once. She only had one opportunity to do this, and one shot at it. If it works, fine. If it doesn't, she can be mine. Tennis. She needs to wait until she grows up. But then he says, "V'timayim v'tanase." Now this is apparently a problem. If you just said she already did miyun when she was younger, what do you have to do miyun again when she becomes an adult? So we'll see more later. Two opinions. One is that she has to, I guess, verify that she actually meant the miyun that she made previously, or to say you have a choice. Either she can be memayin, if she wants to be memayin, that's it. There's only one off, and then you got to wait till after bas mitzvah. Or if she wants to get married now, she goes straight to the suyin. Then she can get married, because remember, Bishame holds that once you get married, you can't walk out. No more mean anymore. Okay. Says the Gemara, my time is Bishame. What's the logic of Bishame? Why does he say that once you're married, you can no longer be married? We'll give a number of reasons. Number one is, Abuda says, B'shein tonight, b'nesuyin. You cannot, once, in other words, by Kedushin, you can make it tonight. You do this, we'll be engaged. You don't do this, you won't be engaged. But once you're married, you don't make tonight, because if you make it tonight and it doesn't, and you don't keep it, comes out that all the relations that we had in the past few months all turn out to be znus because we never married. And we don't want that to happen. And in fact, the tonight doesn't help by nesuyin. And why? Because we assume that even if you made it tonight, once you decided to proceed with a marriage and you live together intimately, definitely you're meicheler on whatever tonight, whatever requests were, because otherwise you wouldn't have done it. You wouldn't have continued living with her until you sorted out the tonight. So in other words, you're meicheler. And the same thing, if you went even just a chuppah, we assume that you're meicheler. So therefore, our problem is that if we're going to say, if she's married, she can go ahead and walk out. We're going to think, a lot of people don't know about Allah. They'll think, must have been a Tanai, you can walk out. They'll say, even though there's a Tanai, you can undo a marriage. And the truth is, they can't, because we assume you're Michael. Mistakes can arise. And if a Nasuya can walk out under 12, people think, they won't realize because she's under 12. They'll think, yes, Tanai bin Nasuya. You can make a Tanai even after even to apply after you're married, and therefore we don't want that mistake to happen. So the Gemara, if you only went to the chuppah and you weren't boil, Shammai says that you can't be a mayim, but over there you weren't moichel yet because you didn't live intimately. Gemara says yes. No, even chuppah means you're moichel. Chuppah already is already the threshold where we say that's it. You're becoming now man and wife, and you're definitely moichel. So okay, but what about Masr? I was looking about. If the father gave over to the shalichim of the husband, that's considered as if it's marriage, and there's no intimacy at all. In fact, the husband might not even have met her. There's no chuppah yet at all. So how come you can't do me in there? No one thinks that the Tanai you're a meichel. We don't make a difference. Rashi picks up on it. It says if the father gave to shluchei bal, the only way you can do mean is if there's no father. The only way you can do mean if there is no father. So Rashi answers, we're just using that as an example. We don't mean the father gave it over literally. We mean, that's the case normally we talk about. It means the brothers or the sister, the mother, gave him over the shluchei bal. Now, from that Rashi comes out a big machlekes Rishonim. What happens if she was married and then got divorced? Now the father no longer has any rights over her, cannot marry her off anymore. But is he any worse than the siblings that at least he can marry midrabanan? Rashi seems clear to say no. The father lost all his rights over his daughter. He has zero rights. He's a step lower than the siblings of the girl or the mother. They can marry her off with Rabban. He can't. That's why Rashi has to answer to brothers who did it, and we're just using the token example of Shluchei Av. However, other Rishonim say no. We're talking about Shluchei Av literally, but the father now is no worse than the siblings. That if he decides to marry her off at the age of 9, at least with the Rabban she's married, and you do mean. But Rashi obviously doesn't hold that. Second one further, and by Sil's logic, maybe everyone knows the strict Tana, the Rabbanon. Everyone knows that in strict Tana is the Rabbanon, and if they walks out, they all understand. Nobody's going to make that mistake. That's Rabbi Yehuda's understanding. Comes on, Rabbi Yisrael, they both say, time of Shammai, not these all together. Nobody wants to. The whole reason why we said a girl should get married by her siblings, by her mother, is we don't want her to be, to hang around the streets. And if we're going to say what? That you can just walk out. People don't like to have a relationship which turns out to be just for snus. And if they know that you can just walk out, that means retrospectively everything all the years they lived together was not marriage. People will refuse to get married. So we'll wait till you're old enough to be. We want to consummate the marriage, and we want it forever, to last forever. And they don't want it to turn to snus. And therefore we're hurting it. The whole purpose is to try to get married. And here this is a disincentive. Therefore, Bishama says we don't allow her just to walk at once, and that's it. And once it's Nasuyin, you can no longer. That's it. Now that you're having marriage relations, you cannot be married at all. What about say what about nichel chuppah v'lo nivla? What if there's no znus at all? Then she should be able to walk out, and the shammai says he can't. Michael Mema lo nichel et have a chuppah the surah. Even the chuppah, people are not going to be happy to go through the chuppah if it might turn into an issue. She just walks out then and there. The whole thing doesn't smell right. It's a disincentive for people to be interested in her. So you want to ask a question, what about Mosa over there? Nothing really happened at all. There's no people don't get discouraged or anything else. Like Plugabon, again the same thing. Rabbanon don't make a difference. So the Gemara, what do you call Kivni Gedushin? Basil. What's Basil? Basil says people don't view it as nus because they went through the whole process of a marriage, and after 2 years she walks out. They're not going to say, "Oh, the last 2 years was nus," because you went through a chuppah, kedushin, rabbonim. No way. Kivni Gedushin ksuva, and there's a ksuva as well. Nobody's going to say that this was a be'ilas nus. So therefore, we're not worried. Papa gives a third reason. He says, time of the B'Shamai should pay it. The reason the B'Shamai is because it paid it because of the assets that she brings into the marriage, known as nichsim, like the plucked assets where the husband takes care of it and he keeps the dividends and then returns it to her afterwards. And this is a valid reason for B'Shamai and Hill. How's that work? Time of the B'Shamai should pay the same thing. Time of the B'Shamai should pay it. Why do we say she can no longer work out once they get married? Very simple. If the husband knows he's going to work in this field for no purpose, because she can after 2 years walk out, she's 9 years old to get married, she can walk out when she's 11 and he'll think to himself, why am I working so hard to help her? So he's not going to put any effort into her assets. So we want to give him an incentive. Once you're married, she can't walk out. But she can walk out. He'll rip out of the field whatever he can without putting any investment in it. The Sefer he thinks, well, he's going to leave anyway. When Daf Kuf Zayin about 10 lines to the bottom, explaining Beis Shammai's different views about Miyun, where Beis Shammai says that the only girls that can be mine if they're engaged, not if they are married. Once they're married, they can no longer walk out, and we had a number of reasons why they cannot do that. And we had the reason Rabbi Yosef, because people don't say, well, if he walks out, that means all longer was nus. And then why would we marry her? And Basil says, since you went through chuppah, nobody's going to think that way. Now we have to have Papa. Papa saying the reason is, Beis Shammai's reason is very simple. She brings in these assets. He works. He invests in these assets so he can get the dividends. But if he knows that she can walk away and take everything back with her, why would he put any investment in there? He'll just take the dividends and the field dies eventually. He doesn't care. Basil uses the same reason to say the opposite. Why she could walk out. Adrabah, Kiva and Amid, because on the contrary, this is an incentive to work harder. He wants to convince her to stay with him. Kiva and Amid, since you say to mine, said that she can walk out. He will invest money and time into the field. So what he thinks, if he puts no time and effort into the field, what do you think her family is going to advise her? Her relatives will advise her to walk out. Walk out. This is an incentive for him. This is This is an incentive for him to work harder. Taking about further, that's reason number 3. Comes along with reason number 4. Others says, I'll give you the reason B'Shamai why once she's married she can no longer walk out. How many times B'Shamai she'ein adam pereach besudem mafsida. Nobody's going to invest all that money and effort to make a big party to get married if she can just walk out of it afterwards. So he's not going to be. He said this is sensitive people getting married, and we wanted to get married. We don't want it to roam in the streets. We want it to be provided for. Remember, we're talking about a girl the Yisayma. So we want it to be provided. We're a father who gave her away before already. So obviously the father has no money. So we want to help her out. We want to give people incentive to marry her. So therefore, once they're married, that's it. She's there for life. They're both happy, even though there's a chance that she might walk out. They're both happy to go ahead. There should be that people out there should know that they're both ready and invested in getting married, and it makes it easy for both of them in the future, that people know that they're marriageable kind of people and they're good, and therefore make it easy to find more shidduchim. Says the Gemara, the next argument was Beis Shammai says she can only walk out on her husband, but once the husband passes on to the brother-in-law, if he dies childless, then it passes on the brother-in-law. The Beis Shammai said, oh, so the whole new din now, this is a Yevama, it is a Yavam, and she cannot be mined by Yavam anymore. And Basil says, no, this Yavam Sachakol is taking the place of the former husband. And the former husband, she can walk down, she can walk out from the Yavam as well. We actually had a machlekes 2 months ago from Amoraim, whether how do we view Yavam? Is Yavam like a new person, or are you just standing in the shoes of the first one. Second, Rabbi comes along the following day. He says you can only be memayin lema'amore. For example, the brother-in-law goes ahead and gives her a maimer, which we said before, kedusha, which is only midrabanan. So she can say, "I'm going to be memayin. I'm going to walk out." Well, the ena mamen is lizikosi. But once her husband dies, if the brother didn't do anything, and the Torah says you're now tied to your brother, the Torah says if you would have been married, you would have tied to your brother. So midrabanan now you are tied to your brother-in-law. You have a zika. To undo a zika. Mina is not going to help. She needs a chalitza to undo the zikr or marry the brother-in-law. So Gemara now wants to know what's the difference. My time, Rabbi Isha, what in the world is a large Rabbi Isha? You can walk out of the maimah, but you cannot walk out of the zikr. What's the difference? So he said like this: maimah, the medaita. Since maimah, who's the one who initiated maimah? Maimah was man-made. So machi akra, so therefore she can walk out of it. You made it. I want to walk out. Zika the balkorcha, zika is something which is the law compels you that you have to marry your brother-in-law if your husband died childless. And the akra, she doesn't have the capacity to walk out of that. You need still a chalitza to unravel that, to sever that tie. So what are we talking about? Bia. What happens if the brother-in-law decides to actually have bia with her? No, now it's his wife because she's under 12, and according to Miss Hill, she can walk out again. So what's the logic? That you tell me because Baal Korcha, because it's not anyone's voluntary doing. Okay, not her voluntary doing. But over here we see clearly Maimah she had to accept. Bia we learned before even Baal Korcha, and yet she could walk out of it. So it's nothing to do with whether she's compelled to or not. But it be the Baal Korcha, even though it's against the will. When the brother-in-law comes in and has bia with her, it becomes his wife, and she can walk out of that. Umatzi Akan, she can walk out of that. And you don't even need a get for that beer because she said miyun. Because Beisil says you can be mine 4 or 5 times, doesn't matter. And Beisil makes no difference, you can be mine to your husband or to your brother-in-law. Ela bia, maimedu, I'll tell you the difference. Bia and maimedu huka avid matzi akra. Since it was initiated by a person, by a person, therefore you can undo that. Zika in the case where it says mahatoida, it's a din, and it's a din again, not because you decided or he decided. Therefore, you can't undo that. But you can't just undo that. You need to go through the process of a chalitza or yibum in order to end that kind of zika. So zika needs a pu'ula. Miyun is not good enough. Ula disagrees about Yeshua. He holds mam enes afla zikasei. Ula says you can be mayin. Maimer, she can also walk out of the zikr. She can say after her husband dies, I'm not interested, and just walk out. You don't need chalitza, you don't need anything. My timer, what's the reason? So you come like the only reason why the brother-in-law is there is to take the place of the original husband. Well, the original husband is not there anymore. What's the brother-in-law defending? Right? So there's nothing left. She could be a mayin. And from the brother-in-law, because the brother's only taking the place of her husband, and she can walk out of her husband, she can walk out of her brother. Says the Gemara, or once she walks out of her husband, the meaning of the husband, there's nothing left. What are you tied to? Why are you involved with me? Your only connection is through your brother, but I'm not involved with your brother anymore. I was with mine. Okay, Ace for Rav Ula. So Rav asked Ula a question. You say you can be memayin from the Zika as well as if you were never married, not only to your husband, but also to your brother-in-law. So I asked the question. There's a law that says, let's say, for example, your daughter, Shimon's daughter, got married to Reuven, but they're only married midrabanan. Why they're only married midrabanan? Shimon is alive. The father can marry off his daughter Mahatayra. She was a 9-year-old girl. Because what happened was Shimon already married her off at 6. She got divorced. And that's called the Yisoima B'chai Yavir. So now, when she gets married again, which is what Torah Machlek is showing you whether the father can marry her off again or just siblings and the mother, when they marry her off again, she's now only married Rabbanan. So Shimon's daughter is married Midrabanan to Reuven. And then what happened was that Reuven died. Reuven died. So obviously, Shimon is the brother-in-law and the father. And obviously, there's no Yibum there. The question is the Tzara. Because the Tzara of an erva is also exempt from Yibum, is free. But over here, Mahatayda, there's no erva. Mahatayda, we don't recognize the marriage to Reuven. It's only Midrabanan. So what happens in this case? She can always be Mamayin. We'll see more later whether we encourage her to be Mamayin so that the Tzara can go ahead and marry or not. Rab Shimon and all that. We'll see later tomorrow. But in the next week. So it says over here, what happens in this case here? So what does this Tzara do? The Tzara now is sort of in limbo. She cannot marry Shimon because she might be the Tzara of an erva. The fact is that the daughter was not Mamayin, so her co-wife is an erva of Shimon. she can't just walk out because the tzara, her co-wife, has the ability to end her marriage with Reuben, and therefore she'll be the other tzara will be the remaining wife, only one wife. She has a mitzvah yibum, so she needs chalitza without yibum. Says the Gemara, so let's say the wife of Reuben could have walked out and didn't. So Rasa, what does a co-wife do? On the one hand, she needs to have a chalitza because since she could have, Shimon's daughter could have walked out, and therefore this woman here would have been the only surviving wife of Reuben. So she have a mitzvah yibum, so she needs something to undo it, chalitza. But on the other hand, she doesn't do yibum, but why not? Because she's a sort of an error. The fact is that her co-wife did not walk out. Now, according to you, Ula, that even after Reuben died, he can still do the miyun. Let's tell Shimon's daughter, Reuben's young wife, do miyun so that the other woman can go ahead and miyab. But let it be mine right now. Walk out of the first marriage. Because according to you, even after Reuben died, you say, Ula, that you can still be mine to the yavim. Answer the Gemara, Tzoras ever shiny. As far as an erva is concerned, even if she's in mind right now, on the one hand, if she's in mind right now, she has nothing to do with the brother-in-law. But as far as the co-wife, the erva, we don't want it to get married because people don't understand the marasayin. It looks like you had a co-wife who's the erva, and then you're marrying. People make mistakes. They don't understand these little nuances. So, as erva shiny, even though she could be married right now, it's too late. The moment Reuben died, since she was a co-wife of an erva, that's how people know. I'll give you an example. Rambam Cheskel said, what happens in your thing? Let's say Reuben was married to Leah, a young girl, and then Leah was memayin to Reuben. Leah has every right to marry Reuben's father. He can marry Reuben's father. And Reuben's father will treat the relationship between Reuben and this young girl with Leah as if it was a seduce, we had before, Mafuta or Anusa, which a father is allowed to marry the Anusa of his son, or vice versa. So me and Abba Baal Motelis Lavi, that she permitted to marry the father wife that has never married, and so on. But what happens if she was married to Reuben and Reuben died? But B'Yavam, the moment Reuben died, and now she has to live with one of the brothers, she can no longer live with the father. Even though she's been mine right now, it's too late. Why? Because it looked like Alma the fact that we look at the moment Reuben died, it looked like it was his daughter-in-law. If Marasayin, we can't have a situation where she's mine and she married our father. People won't understand. Same over here. Over here, when Reuben died, she was the tzar of an erva. It doesn't matter if she's mine 5 minutes later, it's too late. Rav comes along. Rav, we have an Rav comes along and says, let's say there were a couple of brothers. If she went ahead and Hill says you can remind not only the husband but also the any of the brothers, the brother-in-law. If she's in mind, let's say there were 5 brothers, Reuben died, Shimon, Levi, Yehuda, Issachar. She went to Shimon and says, I'm not interested in you. She's still what do you call it? Rav says, me asuda lezeh. She can no longer marry any of the brothers. Why? What happens if Shimon would have given a divorce? Even though Torah doesn't do anything, you still have to give chalitza or marriage. Once you give a divorce, the Rabbanan said, you know what? It's as if you've established that nobody's going to build the house, the legacy of your brother Reuben who just died. So none of the brothers have a right to marry her anymore. So same here, that if she goes ahead, the comrade, she did the miyun, she can no longer live with any of the brothers. Once you also to one brother, you also to all the brothers. So here makes no difference. And Shmuel says no. There's a big difference between miyun and get. If she tells Shimon, I'm not interested in you, and I'm in mind you have no longer any ties to me, she can still go ahead and marry Levi or have a chalitza from Levi. But like Damiel the balas again, don't compare it to a get. Why not? Balas I get who did by what a get. One of the brothers initiated it, so he represents all the other brothers. And once he gave a get, none of the brothers can marry her because as if they all gave a get to her. Hachahika of the bed. She's the one initiated. She said to Shimon, I'm not interested. I'm mine from you. So because she initiated it, so therefore it's only to the brother that she said it to. I don't want you. I don't desire you. I don't want you. But I'm very happy with the other brothers-in-law. So therefore, Shmuel says but this one is forbidden, but all the other ones is permitted. Rav Asi comes along and says, Mi and Bazeh He argues with both of them. He says if you mind, let's say Reuben had a few brothers, and after Reuben died, she walks over to Shimon and says, "Not interested in you. I'm in mind from you." Muteret afiloi. Not only is she mutter to the other brothers, she's also mutter to Shimon. In other words, her mean was meaningless. Her meaning was meaningless. So you want to try to understand. So Lema, does that mean he holds like Rab Oishia Svidale? Does he hold like Rab Oishia that you cannot be memayin to Zika? No, as he said before, you can be mayin to a minor, you can be mayin once you married one of the brother-in-law, but when it's at the stage before you married anybody, all you have is a bond. That Zika, she doesn't have to, because it came in Hashemayim, therefore she has no ability to undo. Is that what Abba is saying? Therefore she's mayin one of the brothers, nothing happened, it's ineffective, and therefore she still can marry any of the brothers she wants, including the one that she said it to. Is that what's happened there? The Amar Einem Amen Zekase? So Gemara says no. Rav Asi is talking about a case where there's more than one brother. So we're going to make a distinction, a third opinion. There's a difference if there is more than one brother or this is the only brother remaining. Bechad Yavam, there's only one brother remaining, and she says, I'm not interested in you. Then under the Zika, there's nothing to talk about. Like Shmuel said, you can undo the Zika. Bechad Yavam, Hachinami, the Matzia Akra. When does Rav Asi say his din b'shnei yevamim? And this is the difference. When there's more than one brother, Rav Asi says, I think, I don't hold like Rav or like Shmuel, I hold that there's more than one brother, then her miyun doesn't help. If there's only one brother, the miyun helps because there's a zika to one person, she undid it. But if there's two or three brothers and she goes to one of them and says, I'm no longer involved with you, right? I'm no longer involved with you. But you are involved with the rest, right? You can still marry the rest, which is like what Shmuel said. But there's one zika for five brothers. So basically half the zika now has been removed and half the zika remains. You cannot remove half a zika. And therefore nothing was removed. There's no mean for a half a zika. So therefore he says, therefore there's no mean, and if you're allowed to marry all the brothers. Again, if there's only one brother, you walked over and says, I'm not interested in you, so there's only one zika, she undid the zika, no longer any ties to that brother. But if there were three brothers and she walks over to one of them and says, I'm no longer involved with you, but you're still involved with the two other brothers, so you only cut down half of it. We don't look at it as a separate zika to each one. It's one big zika and you cut down a third of it. You can't cut a third of a zika. Either you're bound to them or you're not bound to them. So therefore your mean is meaningless. And because your mean is meaningless, because you didn't remove the other brothers from the zika, so therefore your mean is meaningless. If it's meaningless, you could even live with the one that you just said, I don't want to live with you. The Gemara, the ain mean lechatzi zika. Ki asa Rav comes along Rav named Rabbi Yechanan. Now the question is what Rabbi Yechanan says. We have three opinions so far. We have Rav who says that if you're mayin with one, the meaning is effective everywhere, and now she's a free woman. According to Shmuel, if you're mayin with one, it's meaningless, and if it's only meaningful for that one, but all the other ones you still can. And then you have Rav Asi makes a difference between one brother or a number of brothers. There's one brother you could be mine, but if there are a number of brothers, then you can't be mine at all. Come Rabbi Yechanan says, "Miyana bezeh muteres la'achi." So if you're mine one, you're permitted with the other brothers. And Robin said, but not everyone agreed with him. The question is who, and he said not everyone agreed with him. Who are you talking about? Who did agree with him? Amar Abaye, obviously Rav. Rav says that if you're mine with one brother, it's a good mean for everybody. And Rabbi Yechanan says that it's that you mutter for others. Obviously, Rabbi disagrees. Rabbi says Rabbi Ishia. Rabbi says Rabbi Ishia disagrees. But why? Because Rabbi Yechanan said you mutter with the brothers, and including when you say mutter with the brothers, you're including everybody, including this guy here. But Rabbi Ishia clearly said he cannot do mean on a zika. And here it seems clearly that you can. It seems that Rabbi Yechanan is agreeing with Rav Asi. He's talking about a case where there are other brothers, and he's saying in a case where the other brothers, then the mean is not effective. But it seems that there's only one brother, the mean would be effective, even though there's only a zika. So you want to write the or Amila Rav Asi. Rav Asi doesn't agree with him either. Why? Because Rabbi Yechanan is saying that it's permitted. Rabbi Yechanan is saying that if there were a number of brothers, permitted to the other brothers, but not permitted to the one you asked it. What do you mean? According to the Basi, according to Beisha, your mean is worthless. According to the Basi, since your mean is worthless when you have four brothers and it's worthless because you can't take away a half of a zika or a quarter of a zika, then according to the Basi, you can live with all four brothers. And Abicha says you can live with the other one, but not this one. So obviously he doesn't agree. It's only like Shmuel. Beishamai continues before of only in front of the husband. You're telling me all of these rules. That's a question. There's a famous guy called Pisha in Hagomel. He was a camel, rider. He used to give people rides in camels or freight, and so on. Me and he gave me and his wife not in front of her husband, and it worked. It was effective. So how can you say it has to be done in front of the husband? He was a cheating person. He was a conniving person. He used to cheat everybody. He used to use different kind of wrong measurements and everything else. And because he was not an honest person and he cheated everybody, therefore we decided to change the rules here a little bit, that to make it easier for her to walk out. In other words, the Ritva other learn from here that this whole din of Beishamai, all these chumras that he has is only lechatchila. Beishamai says, he says ein mimanin. So the Rishonim Darshan is talking. He's talking to the Bezdin. You guys should not do mian if the girl was married, but if Lepoili you did it, it's a valid mian. Same thing over here. But if it wouldn't be a valid mian, how can we bend the rules for this guy who's crooked? In other words, but the evidence it always works. And for this guy, we did lechatchila because he's a cheating guy. We decided to save this young girl and take her out of this marriage as soon as possible. And like we did another leniency as well. For example, what is that? Yeah, so we just skip. Yeah, that's why with him as well. We did think which a little bit we changed the rules, but the paid because he was eating from her field and he was robbing her blind. And the only time you do it is when you're married, and Beshame holds from Beshame. Once you're married, you can be mayin. And yet here we did it. We let her go out. So we did two leniencies here according to Beshame. Even though they were married, we let her go out, and even though he wasn't around, we let her go out. So what does that prove? That proves that what the Rishonim say is that even Beishamai is made, but the evidence it's all good. But Chatchil we don't do it. And in this case, the Chatchil we did it to save her. Today, Kitzer Avduba. 2 knots we did for her. We decided because this guy is conniving, we need to save this young girl. She's immature. She doesn't know what she fell into. So the Gemara says further, Beishamai says, "B'fnei Bezdin, in front of Bezdin, town house we lived over there. Chalitza b'miyunim b'shleisha. You need 3 people. Man Tana. Right now, the Gemara understood Beishamai holds 3. Beis Hillel holds you don't need 3. Man Tana, who's the author of this Mishnah? Amar Rabba Beishamai l'cheis Beishamai. He says you need 3 people. However, Abaye says that's what the name of Beis Hillel. Ad Kalaga Beis Hillel l'bina tu muchid. Beis Hillel not arguing on the sense you need 3 people. Bezdin, just saying you don't need experts. But the Hillel holds will say by me and also anan shlichosaya avdinan that we have 3 people and that's good enough. Everyone holds you need 3. When we say bezin, we mean professionals. Professional dayanim. You don't need it. They hold that 2 is good enough. You don't even need 2. And in fact, Faisal said you don't even need 3. You don't even need 2. 1 is good enough. You don't even need 3, but the evidence is good enough even 2 or 1. Beishamai says, why does Beishamai say if you only do mian once and then when she becomes an adult, she does mian again? What do you have to do it again for? So Shmuel says, she has to verify that what I said originally is correct. No, tactically give 2 choices. Or she does mian and she waits, she gets an adult, and then she goes through kedushin again. Then whatever you do is final. Or she did 1 mian, she wants to get married again. But you can't go get engaged and then wait 2 months. You got to get married straight away because then it's final. Because we according to Beishamai, you cannot really unravel it. Bishlai will hang on. It says according to it makes sense. It says and with tinase. It says also she should. It says with timain v'tinase. What does tinase have to do with anything? In other words, clear as me. You do mian and then get married. If you want to do it again, get married straight away at the age of 9. El Shmuel achetagdul. But timing by all you have to do is get when you get adult, she verifies. Kasha, taka problem. Mishnah. What's a Tana? How old a Tana is that you has to be mayin? That the parents married her and with her agreement, parents or her mother or her brothers, siblings, didn't be daita. Now, even those are showing that the father could do it with the rabbanon once she was divorced and came out again, but then you have to add all these extra details. The Mishnah just didn't want to go into that. He see you if they somehow or another got her married without her knowledge, ain't it she doesn't even have to be married. A child that cannot mind her kedushin ain't zich l'mayim. She's so young, so immature, she has no idea about kedushin or anything else. You don't have to be mayim. Rav Lo says, "Ein ma'asik tana klum." If a youngster did it on her own, it's nothing. Elakim b'futa. It's as if she was seduced. A bas yisrael, a kohen, for example, she's a bas yisrael, and she went through the process of the kohen, because she had no idea what she was doing. Bas kohen, so she's a bas kohen married to Yisrael. She doesn't forfeit her rights of truma, teichel b'truma. She can continue eating truma. The big machlekes, because we'll have going to get in the three different periods of a child. What's considered a child maturity as far as transactions are concerned? It's pu'utas, and a little bit older that they know that they can. If they give them a nut, they'll keep it. You give them a pebble, they'll throw it away. What stage are we talking about? If we have a girl that she can do it on her own? Rabbi Yaakov says, "Kol akova shimin ish." Anything which happens, she's there with her husband because of him. Ki'ilu ish, as if we treat her husband as his wife, and kol akova she'ein ish. But if she's there not because of the husband, ki'ilu ein ish is not his wife. What exactly that means, the Gemara will explain later on. In the beginning, get me. They would write a document called a get me, and they would write it. I don't want him. I don't desire him. I don't want to marry him. That's all they wrote in this get. But keeping the chazal, the nafish, the Buddha, there's always a lot of words. We're worried now. We are worried, and Rashi takes to learn means that people, the suffering, who don't know what they're doing, as Rashi explains, will start using this document and say, wow, it says I don't want to marry. Perfect. They'll use this as a get, and it's not a valid get, and they're going to create situations where women will get remarried thinking it's a get, and they'll be mamzerim. Other Rishonim learn, means we are worried that they're going to think this is the value, this is equal to a get, and therefore they're going to say, if this girl now accepts kedushin from the brother of the husband she just walked away from, she'll think it's not a valid kedushin because you can't marry the brother of your husband, and therefore because they think it's a get. In fact, it's mean, and they don't understand that she was never married to the brother. She could to the husband, therefore she could marry the brother. So mistakes can happen. They decided to make the bridge the version as follows: the yen plani me and use the word me and plani is about plani in front of us. That's it. So then it's clear this is not a get. This is a mean. Don't remember what a mean. If she says ef she be plani by, I don't want this one finished. I don't want my this person, my husband. Ef she be kedushin she kachoni imi va'achi. I don't want that. That's enough to be mean. Yes, I can. Furthermore, I'm going to do that. She's sitting in a wagon, which usually the collars was sitting in like a little coach, a little, wagon in the back. Lech is a base of the base. This is the wagon they used to have, a special wagon that they used to take, or a little coach, or a carriage, a special carriage for chuppahs. They would carry her. She would sit there and it was all decorated, everything else. And Amra sitting there, she says, "Ef she be playing by, I don't like this man that I'm about to marry. I don't want it." Zeu mean. That in itself is considered mean. There's no special word for it. As long as she makes us aware that she's not interested, that's mean. Yes, I can go further. There were a bunch of guests sitting in the husband's house, partying for the wedding. And she's standing there serving them. And then she tells them, I don't want to be married to this man. Harehu mean. That is, even though she's sitting there at the party, that's called mean. Yes, okay. Furthermore, even if the husband sent her to the store, to bring something, his object. But she tells the storekeeper, I can't stand my husband. There's no greater mean. I wear the witnesses. Says big machlekes shining. Whether you need witnesses by me, and they just like by Gittin, the witnesses make it happen. Over here also, the witnesses make it happen. So you need witnesses, and they're standing outside, and that's good enough. Or you don't need witnesses. All you need is verification, and the storekeeper there, is totally objective, and therefore we trust him as well. And then there's a whole discussion: if witnesses are standing outside and nobody's aware, are they valid witnesses or not? Because by kedushin, there's a whole discussion whether witnesses that you were not aware of, because then afterwards you can say I was just joking, and I wasn't serious. So witnesses that are called machmin masalagedah, they're hiding by the fence. Are they really valid witnesses when it comes to kedushin? Same argument here.